He became the richest man Rome had ever produced by watching other people's homes burn. And then he lost everything anyway, in a desert. Chasing something money was never built to buy. It starts in the middle of a civil war. His father and brother had already been lost in the fighting, along with the family fortune. He picked the winning side, helped secure the war's decisive battle, and watched his commander declare himself dictator and begin selling off the property of every defeated rival at a fraction of its worth. He bought and bought land, buildings, entire city blocks, until he was wealthier than he had ever imagined possible. Then he noticed a pattern. Most of what he was buying had been destroyed by fire. So he built what may be the earliest organized fire brigade in recorded history. It didn't work the way you'd expect. When a building caught fire, his crew would arrive and simply wait, doing nothing, while he personally negotiated with the terrified owner to sell the property on the spot at a devastating discount, flames still spreading behind them. If the owner agreed, he'd give the signal and the fire finally got put out. If they refused, his men packed up and walked away, letting the place burn to nothing. Either way, he usually ended up owning it. He expanded into mines, farmland, and more property than almost anyone in the Republic's history, until his wealth was simply understood as fact. But wealth, he discovered, bought him influence, not respect. Rome's aristocracy still reserved its real admiration for military glory, and there was one man in particular who had plenty of it, a rising commander, younger than him, already a hero to the public. He grew quietly obsessed with matching that reputation, and in 73 BC, an opportunity arrived that he thought might finally do it. That year, a group of enslaved gladiators broke free from a training school using little more than kitchen tools. And within months, their numbers had swelled into the thousands as more escaped slaves joined them. Two separate Roman armies sent to crush the uprising were humiliated in the field. It was, for the Senate, deeply embarrassing, and for him, an opening. He volunteered to finish the job himself, and the Senate handed him 6 legions. He cornered the rebel forces near a peninsula in the south and planned to simply starve them into submission. Then came the news he'd been dreading. His rival was returning from another campaign, and the Senate was sending him to help finish the rebellion too. Terrified of losing the credit, he abandoned the patient plan and threw his legions into a full assault instead. Thousands of Roman soldiers didn't survive the fighting, but the rebellion was broken. Its leader lost in the battle. A small group who escaped ran straight into his rival's forces on the road home and were wiped out to the last man, and it was that rival who wrote to the Senate claiming the real credit for ending the war. Furious but unwilling to show it, the two men became uneasy partners instead, eventually joined by a third rising star fresh off his own victories in Gaul. Together, the three of them effectively ran the Republic. By his 60s, still the richest man alive by a wide margin, he was still watching his two partners collect the glory he'd never managed to buy. So he did the one thing that had always worked for him before. He spent enormously, this time raising a private army of roughly 40,000 men, and marched east to manufacture the military legend he felt he was owed. It went well at first. Cities surrendered without a fight. What he didn't realize was that his opponents weren't retreating out of fear. They were tied up in an internal succession dispute of their own. Once that dispute resolved, their new leadership sent him a peace offer. He rejected it outright. He hadn't crossed a continent for peace. He wanted the legend. So the following year, he pushed the invasion forward again and accepted a tip from an informant claiming the enemy was weak and ready to collapse. Eager for the glory finally within reach, he chased a small retreating detachment deep into open desert. His scouts went quiet. When a search party found them, it was clear something had gone badly wrong. Ahead, a much larger enemy force was waiting, a third the size of his own army, but entirely on horseback, armed and ready. His troops, despite outnumbering the enemy nearly 4-1, grew visibly nervous. Indecisive about formation, he ordered his men into a defensive square just as wave after wave of arrows began falling on them from every direction. Every time his men expected the enemy to run low on ammunition, resupply camels arrived with more. The barrage never let up. Desperate, he sent his own son out with the cavalry to break the encirclement. The maneuver failed catastrophically. His son's unit was lured away, surrounded and overwhelmed. Rather than be taken, the survivors chose not to be captured at all. Back in the main formation, sensing his son was in danger, he tried to push his lines forward to help, and instead watched an enemy rider approach, carrying something raised high on a spear. It was his son's head. The rider paraded it in front of the entire Roman formation before riding away. He collapsed. What was left of his army retreated in the dark, forced to abandon thousands of their own wounded, who did not survive what came the next morning. Eventually cornered and out of options, he was pressured into a peace meeting, where his enemies staged one final humiliation, offering the wealthiest man in Rome an ornate but wildly unmanageable horse to ride into the negotiation, purely to mock him in front of both armies. The meeting collapsed into chaos. He did not leave it alive. According to several ancient accounts, his fate afterward involved a final symbolic act aimed squarely at the one thing he was famous for, his endless appetite for gold. And the humiliation didn't stop there. His enemies reportedly staged a mocking parade using a prisoner dressed to resemble him, and later, at a royal wedding, timed a grotesque piece of theater around his memory in front of an entire audience, a story almost too strange to be believed, except that multiple ancient historians recorded it independently. What makes this more than a strange footnote is what happened next to Rome itself. With him gone, the fragile three-way balance of power he'd been part of collapsed. His two remaining partners, with no one left to mediate between them, drifted from uneasy allies into open enemies, a rivalry that would eventually explode into a new civil war, one that ended with a single man declared dictator for life, and the Republic itself beginning its long collapse into empire. All of it, in some sense, traced back to one man who had everything money could buy, and spent the last years of his life trying to purchase the one thing it couldn't. If you like uncovering the strange, human moments hiding underneath the history everyone thinks they already know, stick around. There's a lot more buried here.